first phone with bleeding edge camera tech to launch in the West. What am I talking about? It's got a 1-inch sensor, a stepless variable aperture. Every camera on this thing takes stunning photos. Now, is this phone perfect? Absolutely not. The screen's awesome, there's loads of power in it, but it definitely isn't my best gaming phone for a few reasons, and on the way to go. I'll talk about that and everything else about this phone in a lot more detail. But before I do, if you're not already subscribed to Tech Edit, please do. It's how you stay on top of everything that I do, and ding that bell. Now, from the front, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra has a pretty manageable looking screen, 6.73 inches, so a little bit smaller than the Galaxy S24 Ultra and Oppo Find X7 Ultra. But it feels really premium though. When you have it in the hand, you're touching this aluminium frame, and it's 2 millimeters thin. It definitely isn't the skinniest phone on the block, and that isn't even including that. And weirdly, it's the feel that stands out the most. Now, it looks great. It's a flat per inch, means everything looks very sharp and it's easy to see outdoors. Now, the peak 3000 nit brightness is in HDR mode. Day to day, you're probably going to interact with spec, but still really competent. Smooth too, 1 to 120 Hertz adaptive refresh rate, and it's also Amazon, Netflix and YouTube certified for suit your tastes. The phone also has stereo speakers, one at the bottom, one at the top, and they're really nice and loud and expansive, but this phone's much better when you're not holding it, because when you're holding it in landscape, especially for gaming, it's very easy to cover them up. What makes this phone really is blades that control that aperture, a 55 microns, super thin into the hardware. So it's no wonder that this camera performs incredibly. The secondary cameras also really impressed me. The ultra wide at 12mm, the telephoto there, all 50 megapixels across all 4 cameras. And Xiaomi's also opened up the aperture across the telephoto cameras too, which is really great. But I wasn't too enthralled by the fact that they haven't got the biggest sensors on the 25mm camera to f1.8 and the 120mm camera to f2. Incredibly good shots, zoomed in and with nearest macro focus distances on this camera of 30 centimeters from the furthest reaching camera, 10 centimeters using this phone. Now, what does it add? A 1500 milliamp battery, so that's excellent for a day out shooting. You also get a zoom lever, a 2-stage shutter release, a video button and a custom dial that can control aperture, exposure and other things. What's really handy as well is the lanyard in the box. I had this thing in my jacket, firing up the camera along, pressing the shutter button, and then put my phone back so quickly, so much less fiddly than using a touch screen. So it really does go beyond just the camera. Me so much. In the past, Xiaomi phones had either been too vibrant with Leica Vibrant or too muted with Leica Authentic. And while it isn't perfect, I would have liked a middle ground for this phone. Xiaomi's new AISP image processing really does bring that incredible experience, each with its own individual look. Vivo, for example, is more computational, looks really incredible. Oppo's more balanced, and Xiaomi's is more old school photography. Contrast is a little bit higher. It doesn't pull out as much from the shadow to create that super HDR look, but I still really love how photo processing and that photographer kit is switching across them, zooming helped by that photography kit with that zoom lever, which just floats between each camera beautifully. Now, don't get me wrong, photos from the main camera look incredible. Loads of depth of field thanks to that sensor size. The variable aperture does make a difference, predominantly in video, but also in photos as well. You can create that extra bit of depth, or you can get more in focus, and the dynamic range is so good. I really love shooting RAW in this thing, but even in automatic mode with that contrast ramped up, you still had salvageable detail in the shadows. I really enjoyed them be so good. When I was using the 75mm and 120mm cameras, it was able to take a really crisp shot, even with subjects that were moving quite a bit. A branch that was moving a little bit in the wind, I was so impressed, pinching into the shot and cameras on. And that quality extends to the ultra wide too. Having the same sensor across all the telephoto and ultra wide cameras ensures some consistency in the look, but also autofocus across all of them, like I said, creates a versatility that really is best in class. And I think Samsung, Google and Apple could really learn a thing or two from what Xiaomi's doing on this phone. Video you record on this phone also looks so good, especially from that main camera. The 1-inch sensor matched with the versatility of that variable aperture means in bright and dark situations, you're gonna get such good looking low noise results, but also very little blown out content too. And it's able to shoot log in Pro mode. You can control that aperture nicely stabilized, and the front camera also shoots 4K, which hasn't been the case on a lot of video modes. It can shoot HDR video, it can shoot 8K at up to 30 frames per second, log video. But the 8K is interesting because this could be the first phone I've used which can capture 8K that's actually really usable on a tripod, especially because it's going to have that extra stable light 8K video. You're able to crop a fair bit more into it, and even handheld it doesn't look terrible. That 1-inch sensor really coming through there. It won't perform as well, especially on the telephoto megabytes for a minute of 8K video. And as you can see, it looks pretty solid handheld. The stabilization looks pretty solid. Micro judders though are going to hold it back. It's being easy to cover up. Ergonomically, it's not the best gaming phone around either, but it's still get to the 14 Ultra that I'm not in love with is HyperOS on top of Android 14. And specifically, it does some weird things. For example, it wants to serve me ads in. So this is not a cheap phone. This is not a Poco that's subsidized. This is a flagship that costs £1,299. Also, if I want to change my wallpaper, I have to interact like something I want to be doing on a premium phone. Also, when I want to sell, other than the Google Play Store, even phones like the Honor Magic 6 Pro gives me an option of which app store to go to. Now, I don't love that, but it's definitely better than not being served the Google Play Store. So while Xiaomi's HyperOS is very smooth, stable, I had no issues day to day. If you really want the most kind of refined experience that doesn't feel like it's pushing stuff in your face, it probably isn't the one to go for. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra comfortably lasts a day with that 5000 mAh battery. You may struggle with a day of heavy photographing and gaming to get through a full day, so it really benefits from that battery bump that you get from the photography to the camera grip. And this should hopefully put a lot of pressure on other manufacturers to be as with that main camera and that stepless variable aperture, and that photography kit elevates things to another level, making it feel like a camera as well as perform like a camera. Camera for your setup that's connected, this could actually be more practical than a lot of compact large cameras like an RX100 for example, even if the quality of that eSIM and with HyperOS. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, learned something about this phone. If there's anything else you want to know, let me know in the comments section below. Like, subscribe, ding that bell to stay on top of everything I do. Thanks for watching.